In this video, we're going to continue to explore our request. We're going to learn how request can automatically parse the JSON for us. We're also going to figure out how we can actually print a forecast using the response data. And finally, we're going to explore some options for the Dark Sky API, allowing us to do things like change the language from something like English to French, and change the units from something like imperial over to SI, so you could get the temperature back in Celsius as opposed to Fahrenheit. Let's get started by having the request module automatically parse the JSON response for us. We can do this by customizing the options object, and there is a list of all available options over in the documentation. So if I head back over to the request module page and scroll down to the table of contents, way near the bottom, we have all available options. If we click this, this is going to list out all of the options we can use. Now up top, we already have the URL option, which we've already used. If we scroll down the list a little ways, we're going to see a JSON option. JSON in lowercase can get set to equal true or false. In our case, we're going to set JSON to true, which is going to have the request module automatically parse JSON responses for us. So over inside of our code, what do we need to do? We're going to add a second property onto this object. So right here, alongside of URL, we'll set up JSON in lowercase. This is important. If you use uppercase, it's not going to work. Then we're going to set it equal to the Boolean true, saying we would like a request to parse this as JSON. Now from here, that means response.body is already going to be an object. There is no need to actually parse it. So let's go ahead and change what we're doing inside of our function. Right here, I'm going to use console.log to print the same stuff using our new setup. That would be first up response. Response.body still exists, though since we've set JSON to true, it's no longer a string. It is now the parsed object. From there, we're going to access currently, which is what we were already accessing and dumping. That's what we're seeing down below. Now we can save app.js. I can rerun the program, and what do we get? We get the exact same response. I have my object showing up with my current information. It's still clear, and the temperature has increased a little bit to 57.55 degrees. So now that request is parsing the JSON for us, we don't have to manually add that code every single time we're trying to make an HTTP request from Node.js. From here, I want to focus on printing a forecast to the user. Now that means we have to figure out what data to include and what to leave off, and that can be tricky to do when you're looking at a dump of your data from the terminal. I find it much easier to use the browser to explore what data I want to include from a JSON response. Now, currently, the information we're seeing is very hard to parse since it is just a JSON string. There are Chrome extensions out there, though, that allow you to see nice parsed formatted data. There are extensions for other browsers as well, like Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer. So what I'm going to do is search Chrome extension, and the one we're going to use is called JSON Formatter, though there are literally dozens of different options out there. Right here, I have the Chrome extension, and all I'm going to do is install it. I'll take a quick moment to add it to Chrome. And once we have it installed successfully, we can go ahead and move back to that page, refresh things, and this time the Chrome extension is going to notice that JSON has been returned, and it's going to parse it for us. Now over here with this particular extension, I can also view the raw data should I want to, but the whole goal is to view the parsed data. Now we can collapse the various properties, easily navigating what we have here. So we have this root object. It starts up here on line 1, and it gets closed way down below at the very end of this object. So way down here on the last line. Everything inside of there is part of that object. Now, this object is accessible to us as body. So when I'm accessing response.body, I am accessing this object. From there, I can grab any of its properties like currently, which is the fourth one listed. That's why response.body.currently works. I could also use response.body.timezone as shown here to get the time zone for the current location. So now we have a slightly better idea as to how we're accessing this information. Below currently, we have minutely, so we can get a minute-by-minute forecast. If I was to collapse that, we have hourly, below that we have daily, and below that we have some flags, and we also have the offset, which are not particularly useful for our purposes. Now, what are we trying to do here? Well, currently, we're just going to use the currently property, though we do have other forecast information we could use to get even more data, which we'll explore a little later. So for now, we're just going to focus on this object, and all of the properties are values we can use. Let's go ahead and talk about exactly what type of forecast we'd like to print. Down below, I have some challenge comments. It's going to be up to you to use the information on currently to print a little message using that actual information. So in general, the goal is to print something like this. It is currently 58.55 degrees out. There is a 0% chance of rain. Now, this piece of information, the current temperature, and this piece of information, the chance of precipitation, they're both available on that currently object. I have a temperature property. This is where I get the temperature from. And I also have properties related to precipitation. Right here, I have precip probability currently at 0. So using these two pieces of information, we want to generate the following forecast. That means you're going to comment out this line or remove it and add another console.log call in to print your forecast. From there, you're going to test your work. So you want to run the script and make sure you're seeing your string with the correct values added inside. Take as much time as you need to generate this string using those two pieces of dynamic information, and when you're done, come back and click play and we'll work through it together. How'd that go? Let's get things started by working with our message. So I'm going to use console.log to print something, and that something is the string right here with those two dynamic values included. So we start off with some static text. I'll create that in a string. It is currently, followed by a space. Then we're going to concatenate on the actual temperature. So like we did before, that's going to be response.body.currently. That's going to bring us to this object right here. And on that object, we have the temperature property, which is the one we're looking for. So dot temperature. Excellent. Now, after the temperature, we go back to some static text. So I'll concatenate on another string, and we will start with a space, the space between the temperature and the D in degrees. Now I'll start typing out degrees, out, period, followed by the start of the next sentence. There is a space, and in here we have to insert the percent chance of rain. So once again, I'm going to concatenate on a value. That'll be response dot body dot currently dot, and right here we are looking for precip probability. So precip, using the shorthand for the word, probability. And finally, we can concatenate on the closing static text. So after our probability, it's percent chance of rain. So right here, a percent chance of rain. Excellent. Now we have this really long string created, and we can go ahead and actually test our work. So I'm going to rerun the program from the terminal down below. To start, I'll use clear to clear the current output, then node space app.js to rerun the program, and what do I get? I get it is currently 58.22 degrees out. There is a 0% chance of rain, which is fantastic. We were able to make an HTTP request for data, parse that data into a format that was usable, and actually use it inside of our Node.js application in a meaningful way. From here, I want to go ahead and wrap up the video by exploring some of the options we can use with Dark Sky to customize the data that comes back. I'm going to remove those challenge comments, and we're going to head back over to the Dark Sky API dashboard where we originally got our secret key and the example URL we're using. From here, we can head over to the docs page where we can learn how to customize the options available to us, and what we want is a forecast request shown on the left-hand side. Now, if we click that, it is going to show us the example request. Right here, we can see we have the key, the latitude, and the longitude all showing up in the list, and we have an example response down below. Now, if we scroll past that example response, we get to the request parameters where we can start to customize exactly what's happening. Now, key, latitude, and longitude, those are provided directly in the URL as we've seen here. It's /forecast/key, then /the lat, the long. Now, what we want to do is use these other options. For example, we have exclude, so we can leave off parts of the forecast we're not using to make our response faster. We have extend, so we can extend the amount of hourly data we want to get back. We have lang, so we can customize the language being used. And we also have units, so we can customize the units that are coming back. Now, the two most common units are going to be US for imperial units and SI if you're trying to use the Celsius temperature. And we're going to go ahead and explore how we can actually set these up. So all of these optional options like units, lang, and excludes, those are set up as query strings. So that means at the end of our URL, we're going to set up a query string, which starts with a question mark followed by key value pairs. So it's key equals value. Now you can add on multiple key value pairs by using the and sign right here and then adding another one. So other key equals other value. We're going to use this format to set up the options we want. It's important that this comes at the end of the URL. So after the last number in the URL, we're going to put a question mark. Then we're going to set up the one key value pair we want. The name is called units, which matches up exactly with what we're seeing in the documentation. And we set that equal to the type of units we want. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to SI, so I can see my temperature in Celsius. Now, if we save the program, we can rerun things down below, and we get the exact same forecast with a difference in the temperature. It's now currently 14.71 degrees out, with still a 0% chance of rain. If I do want to stick with the imperial units, I can always hard code it or fall back to its value, since this is indeed the default. Now, if I rerun the program again, what do I get? I get the old temperature we had, although it went up a fraction of a degree because I'm currently filming in the morning and it's getting warmer outside. So now that we have this in place, we know how to customize the response we're getting back. I'm going to go ahead and remove units since the imperial units is indeed the default value. If you're interested in seeing your weather information in Celsius, I recommend keeping units set up so you can print that temperature instead of Fahrenheit. Now, before we go, I want to pull in one more piece of information into our forecast. If we head back over to the data in the browser, we can explore more than just this currently object. Sure, this contains some useful information, but there are plenty of things that are not there. For example, what's the temperature high for today, or what's the temperature low? If we collapse currently, we'll see there are three other main properties for getting weather information. We have minutely, hourly, and daily, all of which contain a forecast of that type. So I have a minute by minute forecast in here, an hour by hour, and a day by day forecast. Now for all of those, we have this data property. So I have daily.data. If I expand hourly, I have hourly.data. And lastly, minutely.data. That is an array of objects where each object gives you some information about the thing you're looking at. So let's look at daily. We have an array of objects inside of the data property. The first object contains a bunch of information about today. So right here, I have things like the visibility, the temperature min, the temperature max, the apparent highs and lows. All of this information could be used in the forecast to describe today. Now, the second object in this array would be information about tomorrow. So right here, I can see the summary for tomorrow is clear throughout the day, and I have other information like the high and low, which I could also incorporate into my project. What I'm going to do is pull in the first day's summary. So we access that data property on daily. From there, we grab the first array item, which is an object, and we grab the summary property. And we're just going to toss that right up front. So before our current string, we are going to access right inside of console.log response.body to get to this object, then .daily, then .data, and remember, data is an array. I'm going to access items by index using bracket notation. I want to get the first one with the index of 0. That is going to point to this object, and we're going to grab that summary property. So dot summary. Now from here, I am going to concatenate on the rest of our message using the plus sign, and I will put a space before it so our two sentences aren't crammed together. Now we have even more information about the forecast, and we can rerun our program to see what we get. So right here, if I rerun it, what do we get? We can see we now have the summary before the message we had before. So this is what we had before. This is the new stuff. It now reads, clear throughout the day. It's currently 58 degrees out. There is a 0% chance of rain. So that's a pretty good summary of today's weather, giving you some useful information. Now that lang option would come into effect. If we wanted to change the language, we could do so. Obviously, we would need to rewrite the static strings that we created, but we could have Dark Sky automatically generate the summary in a different language, and that's the last thing we're going to do. Over in the Dark Sky documentation, if we scroll up before units, we had that lang option right here, and there are all sorts of different languages. If we scroll down, EN, which is for English, is the default. I'm going to switch it over to ES for Spanish. So I'm going to set up the lang option on the end of the URL. So I'll scroll to the right. Now I don't currently have units set up, so I do need to add the question mark. Then lang equals right here ES. If you already had units, you would just use the ampersand after units and set up the other key value pair. Now that we have this in place, we can rerun our script once again. And what do we get? We get the summary shown in Spanish and the rest shown as it was before. So if we were creating an application for Spanish-speaking individuals, we would obviously write out our own Spanish for the static parts and have Dark Sky generate its text using the language we set up. Let's go ahead and remove that option unless you are interested in creating this program in a different language, and that's where we're going to stop for this one. We've done a few important things here. First up, we got request to do some more work for us by having it parse our JSON. We also explored how we can explore data using the JSON formatter extension in the browser, making it easier to see what data we can actually incorporate into our application. And then we set up the forecast string and we explored the options available to us. Now that we have this in place, it's time to talk about how we can change the location. You'll notice that the forecast API requires the latitude and longitude of the location you're trying to get a forecast for. It can't take in a string like Philadelphia or Belgium. It needs more detailed information, the lat and long. In the next video, you're going to learn how to use another API that can indeed get the lat and long for us when we provide it some sort of English readable address. I'm excited to get to that, so let's go ahead and jump right in to the next one.